welcome to the first Possibilities Publishing live hangout with our authors. Tonight we've got Jenny Fiore, author of Afterbirth, and we will hopefully have Cindy Kane joining us in just a second, author of Bad Mommy Moments, having a little bit of technical challenge with Google. So if you have questions, just go ahead and type them in and we'll be able to see them and we will answer them. I'll read them out and Cindy or Jenny will be able to answer them. So while we are waiting for Cindy to join us, Jenny, why don't you talk a little bit about what prompted you to write Afterbirth in the first place?
Cabin fever. That's what it started with. So it started with a blog and a single blog one night on a bad night, very soon after Beckett was born, my youngest, and he was maybe 2 weeks old, and I just thought that I could handle so much more with the second child. I had my oldest having a sleepover. I had this 1 week old baby, I think he was at the time. We put up a tent. We were having s'mores. I thought I had it all going on, but deep down inside I knew I didn't. And there was just everything came crashing down that night. One of the kids got the pukes all over in the yard and in the house, and Beckett was crying, and we were up late. And I just took a look at what was going on, and I said, this is going to be our life for a while now. And it's not going to go back to normal just because I think I got the hang of it the first time. So I actually went in, I think it was probably in the middle of the night that night, and just wrote my first blog entry. And then that became just a thing that I looked forward to doing. Every so often, every few days, I would just kind of pile up these things that I needed to say. And initially it was sort of like a journaling thing, and then it became more like going back to the writing that is my background and feeling connected again. So then it became a way for me to practice my writing, and then after a while I thought, I'm going to turn these into a book someday, and I really started to pay attention to what I was doing. And then I had drafts going in the background, and I would kind of test drive things on the blog, and eventually I ended up with a pretty large accumulation, after 3 years of doing that, of things that I was proud of, and then 90% of it I wasn't, and it was like practice, and I took the 10% and ran with that.
That's great. That's really interesting. I think that's a similar story I've heard from other mommy bloggers, that it just sort of starts in a moment of needing to reach out,
yeah,
and connect.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know that when I was first staying home with my first child, I thought I couldn't believe how isolating it was. And that's such a not original thought, but at the time when you're going through it, it just feels like this is the first person that's ever happened to. I had no idea it was going to be so lonely, and nobody told me, because if you're not connected to that world at all, which I wasn't, I don't have a big family. I don't have, I have one sibling with no kids, and none of my friends had kids. So it was like baptism by fire. And I totally thought I was pioneering this lonesome territory until I started blogging and meeting other people that were doing that online and connecting with people who were in the same place as I was, and then some people who were well beyond that place, like grandmothers would come out of the woodwork and say, oh, honey, I remember this, and it was fun to have these people that I didn't know, like reminiscing with me. Seriously, like some grandmother from Canada sending me a comment on my blog saying, that happened to me too in 1967, and you just realize you're part of a community, and then it really inspires you to keep writing more and more because you realize you can connect.
Wow, that's really cool. That's a really neat outcome of having your blog.
Yeah, and Cindy Kane actually was one of the first blogs I read. I remember being just online. It was like well, of course, blogging was relative. I mean, it's not been around forever or anything, so it's sort of new. And I just remember coming across this blog that she wrote. It was like a hi, Cindy.
Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm talking about you right now.
Oh, that's a scary thought.
um, I don't want to interrupt. Meredith, did you want to introduce Cindy?
You keep going, Cindy.
Okay. So Cindy was just saying that when I first started to discover that blogs existed, I mean, they weren't even on my radar. You were one of the first blogs not the first blogs I read, but one of the first blogs I read and went, oh my gosh, this lady's hilarious. I have to read this. And so I came back to that over and over again. It was the first time it was like opening the morning paper, that I had a morning paper again. I had something that was like on my regular schedule. And I still remember the first one I read. It was about some creepy man at the park who I believe was not wearing underwear. And was coming down.
Gosh, yes. I got stuck behind him climbing up a slide.
Yeah. And you wrote like a dear John letter to him, and it was hilarious. And I do just remember thinking, like, I don't think I'd had a good belly laugh for a while, because everything that was funny to me was like new funny to me. Like, I just didn't have the community around me where I could be like, oh my gosh, I was at the park and with my kid, and lots of my friends, like I was saying, didn't have children yet, and they weren't feeling the isolation I was. And so, I mean, they just didn't get the thrill I got out of like finding this other mom that was finding the humor in it all and was a good writer. So anyway, Cindy, I became a fan of Cindy's early on. But I still am.
Well, that's great.
Yeah.
That's very cool. And that's kind of how you found me, Jenny, right? Was through Cindy.
Yeah. Yep. I ordered Cindy's book. As soon as I saw she had a book out, I ordered it, and of course I saw your imprint in there, and thought, well, I'm going to reach out. Cindy and I feel like we have a lot in common. I mean, we live in different parts of the country. We have our children are different ages. I think it's all kind of incognito with blogging. You never name your children. I mean, to the public, you never. My children are named, but I just don't share their names with the public. And I don't know. I just felt like Cindy and I had some things in common beyond just blogging.
That's great.
Yeah.
So Cindy, Jenny just told us about how she got involved, or how she got started blogging, what gave her the inspiration for a book. So why don't you talk a little bit about that for your side?
When I started blogging?
Yeah, what kind of got you started on it, and what led you to write your book?
I am a serial journal starter, so I have a million journals that I've started that are all over the place that have never been finished. And so I found the platform of blogging and figured it would just be one more journal that I'd start. And I just started writing there, and then I started meeting other moms, which, as Jenny was saying, it was for me such an isolating experience that I was shocked to find other moms who are not only honest but funny, and especially in Jenny's case, was such a good writer that it was the same thing. She was one of the first blogs that I was following back and just couldn't wait till she wrote more. And then it was the same with the book. I just had all of these little pieces and wanted to put them together. And, you know, it was a 6-year process, so it took forever, a bunch of nap times and timeouts. And
I love the timeouts.
Yeah. Sometimes it was their timeout, sometimes it was mine.
Yeah.
But
So you both kind of got started with the blogging too, as a little bit of an outlet for having little kids, right, and feeling a little bit isolated.
Yeah.
And so, but now as your kids are growing up, the nature of the blogging is changing a little bit, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think also just the blog world has changed. It's gotten so much bigger to me that sometimes instead of like, I don't often feel that same rush I used to have of like, I couldn't wait to get on and catch up with those blogs that I had on my feed. My life has changed too. I work a little bit outside of the home, and so I have to be reading blogs sometimes at work, and It feels more saturated now.
Hmm.
So I'm a little more selective, I guess, about using my time for that. You know,
Sure.
I don't have 2 hours in the morning during a nap either to just sit and decompress in my robe while I waited for the next whatever next temper tantrum it was going to be, whatever it was. It's just life is different now, so it feels like more of a luxury than it did before. It would be a luxury for me to sit down the way I did before and really keep up with blogs, reading blogs.
I feel the same way. I loved it, and I missed that. I think as the girls started getting older, the first thing I lost was the time to read other people's blogs, and then all the relationships that we had formed just across the country, really, and in some cases in different countries. Those kind of started falling away a little bit, and then from there, you know, the girls started getting older, and I felt like I didn't really have the right to talk about their life anymore. And then when their friends started following me on Instagram, I freaked out because then now it's really their life and it's really their generation, and I don't feel like I have as much to share that I can share anymore.
Yeah. And I'm in the same boat with that. I mean, my daughter's of an age; she's her own person. They're always their own people, but there comes a point when you realize they are autonomous people, and it becomes a violation. In fact, in retrospect, there are regrets I have about things that I have written because at the time you just don't. I didn't have the vision because I hadn't gone through it yet of having a child that becomes as autonomous as they become, and you realize they do have private lives. Their private lives take place right in front of you, so it's such a violation. I mean, at this age, my daughter's age, it's taking place right in front of me. So I also feel like writing about my oldest in particular, I almost feel like I'm stealing her stories and telling the stories that she may be, you know, saving up inside to write on her own one day. And of course, I have different versions, but they're really hers now.
Yeah, I agree. That's also why I stopped. And even when the times when I do write, I feel like I have to ask their permission first, and I read them the post first just to make sure. And even that, I mean, at 8 and 9, their feelings a few years from now are going to change. So there's a lot of stuff I've written that I've taken down over the years, but I know it could still technically be out there.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I'm going to embarrass her one way or the other, whether I try to or not. I'll try to keep myself from getting in trouble when possible.
Yeah.
That's a good strategy, I think. And so, so let's talk a little bit about your books just really quickly. Let's start, Jenny, with you and the experience. So, in talking a little bit about the ways in which, you know, the blogging has changed and sort of making your children's lives public and that kind of thing. Have you had any experience with that with the book, or has that been different because those are older stories?
You know, the stories in the book actually don't go back nearly as, you know, they don't have, there's not much in there about when the kids were really little.
Mm-hmm.
And they are right around that year or two before I realized that I needed to back off. And there is one piece in particular in the book that you know, I just didn't think about at the time, that it's just memorialized forever. Something that, you know, seems very innocent and was funny at the time, but it was about my son. And that piece, I think, if I had to do that over again, I would. I don't know that I wouldn't have included it, but I would have definitely put some more thought into it. It didn't even cross my mind that it blows my mind right now that it didn't cross my mind that I was sharing things about him that are one day be really embarrassing for him. But other than that, you know, the book has, I feel like, you know, people I know, people I see in town own it and have said things to me about me. I still remember when my pastor stopped me one day and said, "I bought your book," and I thought, "Oh my God, what did I write?" You know, because all of a sudden, all that anonymity that I had with the blog, I'm never, you know, I always felt like I had some anonymity with the blog. Once my name was on it, all the anonymity was gone, and it just sort of terrified me a little bit. But I just realized, on some level, it's people aren't putting the thought into it that I am. Like, they aren't going to bed at night thinking about my children and what I wrote about my children. So I'm okay with it, but it's probably just that one piece I would take out or reconsider.
That's interesting. I didn't. You'd never mentioned that there was, a piece that you had second thoughts, but I think that's an interesting thing for note for any other bloggers who might be thinking about doing, just doing a book, following kind of your steps, is to really take a second and think forward 5 years, whatever, 10 years, and think about how your kids might react to some of the posts. That's a really good point.
Yeah.
I had that happen once just on a regular post that I thought was very funny, because one day my second daughter, who I guess at the time was probably 4 or 5, she wanted an apple, and so I gave her the apple. She refused to eat it, and so throughout the entire day, every time she asked for something to eat, I gave her the apple until it was at the end of the day. And so I just wrote a silly little poem about her and this apple. And I thought it was very funny. My older daughter thought it was hilarious, but when I read it to my younger daughter, she burst into tears, and she was beside herself, and she's like, "I'm so sorry, I'm such a bad daughter, I should have eaten my apple." And it felt so awful, because, I mean, there was nothing about it that was embarrassing. It was all on me, it was my point of view, and it was me being ridiculous, but still, it wound up hurting her feelings, which I don't know. There's some stuff that I've written that I figured could do that, but I never thought an apple poem would. So it's hard to gauge as you're writing, especially, a lot of this writing is emotional stuff. You just never know how they're going to respond.
Yeah. That's really interesting. That's a really good point that I haven't heard anyone else talk about, any other, mommy bloggers or whatever. So, that's really important. Cindy, what about you for your book? Have you had any unexpected outcomes or responses?
In terms of, like, what you were saying, what I would take out if I could, or change?
Yeah, or second thoughts about anything?
I don't have second thoughts about what I've written about my daughter. I had a lot of second thoughts during the edit, which is probably why it took me over a year to edit the book, because every time I go back and I'd find something I think could be a problem. But in looking back now, the stuff I have second thoughts about is the personal stuff I shared about myself. I had a piece in there that talked about, like, attempted suicide when I was a teenager, and just some of the stuff that I did that the parents of some of her friends have read my book, and I don't imagine that it would ever come up in conversation, but the book's in the house, and I don't know when she and I will ever talk about it. I mean, we will at some point, but I certainly bared my soul in that book, and if she could, I mean, I've got a whole box of them in the basement. If she wanted to read it, she could. But, that would probably be the stuff that I would consider either removing, or I guess I probably couldn't gloss over it. I'd probably have to take the pieces out. But I can't, so.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. I just
wanted to say, when I read Cindy's book, Cindy, I know some of those soul-bearing things that you're talking about, and it's funny just to listen to you talk about it, because then I go, oh, but that's the good stuff. Like, that's then you know that the person is being totally honest with you, and that, like, I'm drawn to that, and I think that's part of why I'm drawn to your writing. So it's like, oh, but I got so much out of this thing you did to yourself. Thank you for writing that, so I could enjoy myself that night while I was reading in bed, Well,
it does at least make me feel better to know that it does at least have that aspect to it. So someday if I have to fight it back, I'll be like, but Jenny liked it, like it meant something. Jenny.
That's great. That is often the thing, the part that the times that you're most vulnerable or share the most of yourself is often the part that connects most with everybody else, but it's also the bravest and hardest thing to do. So it's an interesting sort of balance that you have to strike, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it just makes you really vulnerable, or it makes you feel vulnerable.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, well,
Especially
and
when
that's the
anonymity is
bravery.
gone.
And I think your kid, like with your kids, that's the hardest place to be vulnerable, especially when there's still part of you that doesn't want them to have to think about things like that yet, or doesn't want to imagine that they know about those things.
Right.
At least.
Right. So I'm gonna just take a second, confess that my video has frozen. I still have the audio just fine, and I
Okay.
think I'm seeing questions if anyone's putting them up. But just in case anyone out there is asking questions and I'm not answering them, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's because Google really likes to mess with us, I think. And by us, I mean me and Cindy. Because
It does. Ever since they put that picture up of me in front of my house vacuuming my car,
that's
they
right.
have had it out.
So maybe in the future, Cindy, we won't do hangouts with you. No, I'm kidding. So I do want to just a couple more minutes before we wrap up. But so the thing that I find really interesting about both of you among all of my other authors is that you are both the only bloggers I have turned writers, but also specifically that you were mommy bloggers who publish books or based off of your blog, but then both have sort of either changed the nature of your blogging or move past blogging in general. And so I'm just curious about sort of the next phase for you creatively and how that works for you, and how do you feel the need to replace the creative outlet of the blog and working on the book, or are you, sort of that phase is over and you're moving on? So Jenny, do you want to go first?
Sure. So I think the reason I was drawn to blogging in the first place is I like personal essays. That's my favorite writing. And so, I mean, it was just sort of an obvious, convenient way to do it. And all my source material, I mean, you only have what you have, and that was my source material at the time was what was going on in my life. And I feel like, that's done. And I don't feel a desire to rehash that. And I will even say that I have read some blogs where the parents continue to blog about the children well into adolescence, and I'm turned off by it. Um, I don't have any interest in doing that myself, for the reasons we just talked about. But one of the nice things about still having the blog, really about the whole experience that led up to the book, and the experience of publishing the book and all that goes around it, is that I feel like I've kept my writing elbow greased, so to speak, so that I feel prepared to do more writing. And it would be very different, I think, if I had not spent that time. It's sort of like, even just the value of having a journal. You realize just writing down what's going on in your life, writing down your observations, and finding new ways to look at things, that all helps you continue to be a writer and grow as a writer. So the next step for me, I am working on a book with someone else that has absolutely nothing to do with parenting. It is taking me forever to do because I do still have my parenting life going on. And it takes up a small portion of my life right now because I'm still mostly stay-at-home parent with some part-time work. But I feel like it's helped me think of myself more confidently as a writer. Like, it's not just the thing I thought about doing when I was little anymore. It's a thing I am doing, and it's a thing that I'm good at, but that I need, like everyone else, I need to continue to work at it. And I've had definitely like my embarrassing moments where I go, why did I put that out on a blog? Or, I look back at things I wrote maybe a year or two ago, and I think, oh, that wasn't very good. I'm glad I'm continuing to work on it, and I just feel like the next phase for me is continuing to write in that form. I'll probably continue to write essays, and trying to figure out how to write a book-length work, which is the project I'm working on right now. Is nonfiction book-length work about somebody else's life. And being able to write about somebody's life is something I've learned from this whole experience. the art of observation and writing about it.
That's great. That's really that's cool, and that's really cool that you're working on another book. That's exciting. Cindy?
I keep trying to quit my blog because I feel like I need to move on, and I feel like the time in my life for bad mommy moments, even though my moments are still pretty awful, you know, I'm not even called mommy anymore. So I feel like, you know, that I've grown past it, but I can't quite let it go. And every once in a while, I'll have a couple of days where I just have lots of things to write about, and if I can continue to write about things that are more about me, my perspective, still as a mom, but not about stuff that goes on with my daughters, because sadly I have more information. I could actually write all kinds of stuff where I couldn't before, but like we talked about, it's just not my place to do that. So, you know, I still put up some old stuff, which then makes me a little sad because I loved, like, something about that angsty time. It was almost like being a teenager again in terms of the angst, but there was always something to write about, always something to vent and to try to find humor in. But in keeping that connection with other moms and with kids, I started doing photography, which is something I started doing while I was blogging, even though I never showed my girls' faces, but I've always been taking pictures. So now I'm doing a lot of photo work and picking up jobs that way, and getting a chance, especially my favorites are working with moms and babies and just, you know, capturing the relationships between parents and kids. So I feel like I still have that kind of a connection, and I hope at some point to have things to write about again, but for now, I have a little bit every once in a while, so that'll have to be good enough.
Great. All right, well, I guess we will wrap up this inaugural hangout of Possibilities Publishing authors. Thank you, Cindy, Jenny, and again, Cindy, why don't you each give a quick plug for your book and say where it's available? Do you want to go first, Cindy?
My book is called Bad Mommy Moments, Celebrating the Days of New Motherhood That Suck, and it is available directly to ship from my basement. So, if you would like a copy, I'm giving the ebooks away for free this month for Mother's Day, and actually, my apologies if I have stopped you in public to hand you a book, because I am giving them away for free right now. It is not a reflection of you as a parent, of you as a mom. I'm just giving them away to be nice, really. But they can be purchased on Amazon, and I have a little shop through there, or on my website, which is badmommymoments.com.
Great. And Jenny?
Yeah, my book is Afterbirth, Unconventional Writings from the Mommy Lands, and it's after birth, 2 words. I get asked that a lot. It's available online. Yes. It's available online at Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and also through the Possibilities Publishing page. You can also click through it on my blog at themomplex.net and on my personal website, jennyfiore.com. And I don't know that we have any promotions going on right now, but Meredith, you're the person in the know about that.
Yes, there's a possibility that there may be a quick post-Mother's Day sale that will be kind of a surprise for people, so watch the Facebook page and see what that will be. All right, well, that's it. If you want more information about either of these books or anything from Possibilities Publishing Company, check out our website, possibilitiespublishingcompany.com, or follow us on Facebook, Possibilities Publishing Company, or Twitter, PossPubCo, PossPubco, and you'll find out all the information about these books, the other books, upcoming books, sales, promotions, any of that kind of stuff. All right, well, thanks everyone for joining us. Again, I apologize if anyone tried to ask a question and I couldn't see it, but if you post it on the Google Plus page, I will make sure that Cindy or Jenny provides you an answer. All right, have a good night, you guys.
Thanks, you too.
Good night.
Good night.